Gonna do this so that I can actually, you can see me, I can see you, and we can discuss this uh, in length. Um, the XP issue in this game. Currently, there's an XP issue between people with a discussion within the community and the devs that solo XP versus group XP. Solo XP right now is considered to be the best XP in the game, and group XP is considered to be trash. That is the discussion that we are going to be talking about. To set that discussion up, we're going to talk about a couple different things that I made some notes on during our discussion during the stream, because we keep going over it during the stream, and we're going around in circles. So I'm making one video. We're going to put it on YouTube. Now, group sizes. That's the first thing we want to talk about. We have different group sizes. You have solo, which is 1 player. You have duo, 2 players. You have small group, which is 3 or 4 players. And then you have full group, which is 5 or 6 players. I would say that you never, ever, ever want to have 5 players in your party. The reason for that is because if you have a 6 person in your party, you get the same amount of XP as you would with 5 people in your party. That's kind of like the bonus to having that 6th player. So anything you add, whether it is a healer, a CC class, or a DPS class, is just going to help you because it's going to make you more efficient and more effective in that party. We're going to go over efficiency and effectiveness later on in this. So you never want to have 5 people. So what I have personally found is that a solo is better in some cases, a duo is better in some cases, and then a full party of 6 is better in some cases. Very rarely is a party of 3 or 4 the best way to go, but it could be if you have the perfect group setup. So that is now all out of the way of what groups are. Next thing I want to talk about is lifestyle. We as players all have a different lifestyle. Some of us have families, some of us have jobs, some of us just want to touch grass. Those are things that happen, right? So those types of players are very, very vocal that solo gameplay should be in the game, and I agree. Solo gameplay should be in the game. You should be able to do that and gain decent XP and possibly even get some pretty decent items through solo gameplay. That said, group gameplay is more difficult and harder to get people together to do. So I believe that group gameplay should give more rewards for it. And I think that's where a lot of the player base is at right now, is that group gameplay should be better if you are willing to put in the effort. We're going to get to that again as we get through this video. Next up, I want to reference a tier list video that I did previously. So if you want to see the tier list video of what I believe are the best solo classes in the game, there is some debate on this. It obviously is mostly for funsies, but currently speaking, different classes are better at solo than others, which is the next topic that I want to talk about, which is this doesn't just boil down to solo versus group. And that's where the argument comes in, is a lot of people are saying that just hands down solo XP is better than group XP, and that is not necessarily true. Solo XP is better than group XP for certain classes, but for other classes, it's not. So because of that statement, we need to now talk about efficiency versus the ability to solo, and then the efficiency of group XP. So that's a whole other thing, right? So let's talk about efficiency. Efficiency basically means that you are able to kill a mob quickly, and then you have little downtime before you go and kill the next mob. Some classes in the game are way more efficient than other classes in the game. Most of those classes are high DPS classes. The list that I've made over here, the wizard, the summoner, the necro, and the monk are very efficient classes. They can kill mobs very, very quickly, and they have very little downtime. Dire Lords and Shamans are also fairly efficient, although the Shamans start to fall off at higher levels. They are still pretty efficient at low levels for soloing. Then you have other classes that have low DPS and less efficiency, specifically the Warrior, the Paladin, the Cleric, and the Enchanter. I'm going to reference the Warrior here because that is what I play. I have a level 28 Warrior here, and then my other character is a level 27 Cleric. So I can speak directly to those two, but from my understanding of the other classes, we're going to kind of just, talk about those a little bit. So the Warrior, for example, is I can go and I can fight a mob. Let's say that I'm fighting a light blue or a blue mob. The warrior takes a significant amount of damage, and even with this new ability of Seasoned Veteran, there is a chance that they could die. The best thing that I can really fight as a warrior with a decent amount of gear, the only thing that I don't have plate is the ethereal chain boots and helmet. Everything else here is plate. And then my belt is not plate, but then I have some pretty good gear. I mean, I'm not sitting on terrible gear here as a level 28 warrior. It's decent. It's not the best, but it's pretty good, and it's about where you should be, in my opinion, as a level 28 warrior. So if I go and I fight a blue mob, that blue mob is going to take my health down considerably, and it's going to take me a very long time to kill it because warrior DPS is low. Now, after the fight, I now have to sit down and rest. I have to get to this rested state right here, and I have to wait until my health comes back up. Otherwise, if I go into another fight, there's a chance that I might die. So we're talking that a warrior can only kill light blue, blue, maybe even con mobs. There's no possible way I'm killing a yellow con mob at my level, period. It's not going to happen. And then you're going to have to rest between mobs. A cleric, on the other hand, may not have to rest between mobs, but it takes them forever to kill a mob because they have very low DPS. They did just get an increase or a boost in their DPS through their techniques, which did help them out quite a bit. And they have an ability called Prayerful Combat that allows them to regenerate mana in combat. So they don't really have to rest between fights, but it takes them a long time. So that's what I'm talking about when we talk about efficiency versus can solo. And I think that's a debate that a lot of people are having right now, is that these classes that are efficient, that are high DPS efficient classes, are saying their solo XP is way, way, way higher than the rest of the people that have low DPS and low efficiency. The only exception to that is the rogue, who has pretty good DPS, but can't solo because they can't really face tank mobs. So that's what we're talking about when we're saying that solo is better. And that's because these high efficiency, high DPS can bounce between mobs very quickly is fundamentally better. So now that we have that all out of the way, let's move on to the gear. Gear is also going to be a factor for a warrior specifically, for a paladin specifically. Gear is going to be a factor because as we get better gear, we may be able to solo a little bit better. And right now, itemization in the game is not in a good place. So right now, it's very hard to get decent gear to make a warrior viable as a solo class. So there is that factor, and I just want to throw that out there. So now soloing, what are the benefits to soloing? There's low risk, very, very low risk for these high DPS classes. So for a wizard, a summoner, a necro, a monk, a dire lord, they can, anybody that's got self-sustain, even a cleric, even a paladin, there's very little risk for them because they can heal themselves. They can keep themselves up throughout the entire fight, and there's very little risk of them actually dying. And then there's the efficiency of that, where they can bounce to the next mob, which takes paladins and takes clerics kind of out of that. The next thing is you can play at your own pace. So you can take frequent breaks if you're playing solo. You can do kind of whatever you want. You can, if you have a life, like you have kids, whatever, you can bounce around and do that kind of thing. And that's great. I want that to be in the game. So now, that's basically your soloing. When we talk about grouping, however, grouping requires a lot more effort. You have to get the group together. You have to get the players together. Everyone needs to be communicating. You have a much higher risk because the mobs that you're fighting are going to be, they're going to have abilities like AoEs that you have to stun. If you don't stun them, you're kind of going to wipe. There's like Ice Spike off of the Cripplings deep down in Houndier Cave. Is a huge example of that. If you're fighting those at level, there's the Mana Weavers that do their AoE. There's the Orcs that have like an AoE knockback or fears. There's all of these different abilities that you need to communicate with your party to make sure that you're doing that. So the risk of grouping is significantly higher than the risk of solo. So there's that factor. then you have, the elite mobs. So there's a tougher. That's what I talked about. So now combining everything that I just said together, why would you take, or let's actually back up a little bit. Now, to make an efficient group, because we're going to go back to the efficiency, to make an efficient group, you need a tank, a healer, hopefully one support, or maybe a second healer, and then 3 really good DPS. Those DPS happen to be the wizard, summoner, monk, and rogue. Out of those are your 4 main DPS, ranger. Ranger's in there, and we haven't talked about that. And then ranger is another 5th. So those are your main DPS classes. Out of those classes, the wizard, the summoner, and the monk, and the ranger, I would say, can all solo just as fast XP per hour by themselves as they could with a group. But the group needs to have those classes in it to make them efficient groups. If you don't have those high DPS classes in those 3 bottom spots that I was talking about, so you have a tank, a healer, a support, and then 3 spots that are left for those 5 classes, you need to have 3 of those in your party to make an efficient group to get a decent amount of XP per hour. But those classes don't want to group because it's more risk for them for 0 benefit. In fact, a lot of times those classes would argue that all you're doing is slowing them down because you're playing a warrior and you're playing a cleric and you have like an enchanter in your group that are effectively not really making you kill faster. So that is the fundamental flaw that we are running into with grouping in the game. It's not that group XP is worse, right? Group XP can be very, very good, might even be a little bit better if you make a perfect group, whatever I'm trying to say. If you make the perfect group setup, right? If you have exactly what you need and you can be very, very efficient. So why would those DPS classes that are already efficient solo join a group that has a high chance of potentially dying, losing XP? They have to communicate. They can't take frequent breaks. That literally there's all of these negatives to grouping with 0 positive for those specific classes. And that is the fundamental flaw that is currently around the solo XP versus grouping XP. Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully people understand that. If they don't, then I apologize. I don't know how to explain it any better than that. But that is the current argument and where we need some sort of